Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Mimi's Worm Squad call. I'm so excited to dive into today's topic, which is the worm bin formula. How many bins to produce enough worms for weekly income? So if you are here, let's in the comments, let's put your name and where you're from so that we know who all or how many we have on. Love to see you here. So, um, the worm bin formula, or how many worms do you need to produce to make a weekly income, is a question that I get a lot. And like how do I know how many worm bins do I need to start making a consistent income for my worm farm? So today I'll be breaking down the formula to help you determine exactly how many bins you need based on your sales goals. So the first thing that we want to talk about is why having a formula is important. Well, when starting a worm business, you can really start to feel very overwhelmed. And I know for me, it was like I had so many questions. You're trying to calculate how many worms do you have? How many bins do you need? But really, with the right formula, and I'm going to show you that tonight, it really takes the guesswork out of it so that you can really scale your worm farm confidently. So the idea behind the worm bin formula is to align your production, meaning how many worms you can breed and sell, with your sales goal in mind. That ensures that you'll have enough worms to meet demand without overproducing, or frankly, without underproducing. Because I think you're going to be very surprised. Like last week's call, I know it was a big eye opener for a lot of you. I think you're going to see that again this week, just to see the magnitude of what you need to grow enough worms to really have the amount of worms that you need without having to worry about if you have enough to sell. A lot of people think, because the worms reproduce so quick that, oh, well, I'll have enough worms to sell in the year. But it really determines how much money. Like if you're trying to replace an income of where you work now so that you don't have to work that job anymore, you obviously are going to have a sales figure in mind. So you're going to need to break that down so that you know how many worms you need to be able to sell to make that sales goal. So let's go ahead and get into the numbers and break this down step by step, okay? So the basic formula is to first decide how much income that you want to make. So let's say you want to make $500 per week, okay? So you want to think about that. Then you take how much do you want to sell your worms for? So let's say, for example, if you sell worms in batches of 1,000, which is a pound, and let's just say that you want to get $50 a pound for your worms. Well, you're going to need to sell 10 pounds at $50 to give you $500. Now that is $500 in revenue. So you do have to take your cost, that's a whole different your operating expenses need to come out of that as well. So really you need to be figuring out how much do you need to sell, or what do you need your income to be profit wise, not revenue wise. So we need to make sure that's clear. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to calculate, I've got myself some notes here, y'all. You want to calculate worm production per bin. So next you need to know how many worms a single bin can produce. And we did some tests on that. I think y'all seen some of my videos where we had 100 worms in a bin and we produced 678 cocoons. Now that was cocoons, and depending on how many worms hatched from that, which I have not gotten a count from, that would tell you how much your cocoons are producing. Therefore, you'd kind of know how many worms you would get out of that bin. So you're going to have to do some testing, okay? But if you need to set 10,000 worms to meet your weekly income goal, and each bin produces 500 worms, you'll need 20 worm bins. And I'm gonna have a spreadsheet here in a few minutes to kind of go over this a little bit more into detail to where you can actually see it. The next thing is, so the number of bins equals the total of worms needed for sales divided by the worm produced per bin. So for this example, we're doing 20 bins equals 10,000 worms, which means 500 worms per bin, okay? This is a basic formula, but it will give you a starting point to know how many bins you need based on your sales goal. So now let's talk about scaling and adjustments. You might not need to start with 20 bins right away because many worm farmers start small and scale as demand grows. So here's a few tips to help you. Begin with a few worm bins and gradually increase the numbers as your customer base grows. You can reinvest your profits into more bins. You know, this is what we talked about last week. If you are going to grow your own worms, you don't want to drop ship, you don't want to do affiliate marketing, you don't want to buy and resell. You want to grow your own worms, which is perfectly fine. Starting small and gradually growing your business. The main thing, though, that you need to keep in mind is you need to go ahead and start selling, because you will not know what your demand is until you start selling and know how many customers, you know, you're reaching and how that's going and, you know, that kind of thing. A lot of people think, oh, I need to, you know, have 250 million worms before I can ever open up shop. And that is definitely not the way you want to go, because like I told you before, if your demand becomes higher than what you're producing at the time, you can buy and resell until you revamp your stock, you know, increase your stock. So don't let that be your reason for not going ahead and start selling. You're going to want to monitor your production. Every bin production rate can vary depending on the carrying conditions of your worms. So be sure to monitor how many worms each bin produces. Again, y'all, this is some tedious work, but once you get it, really your processes down, it almost goes without fail that each bin is going to do this, this, or this. You may find some bins produce more than others. So that can help you adjust your strategy, okay? Because if you think every bin is going to always produce the same thing, more than likely that's not, unless you've got some really, really formulas or processes, like you use the same exact feedstock. You're not really feeding food scraps, because food scraps can vary. You know, you might have more bananas this time, or you might have more pineapples the next time. So that can cause your ratios to be different. You want to consider your market. So you want to keep in mind your local market demand. A lot of people start out locally and then they venture out into online. Other people start out with online and then they get more and more local, which has been me. I started out online, and my local market is really starting to pick up this year. And again, it's just been all word of mouth. Someone local found me on the internet, and then they've told a friend who's told a friend who's told a friend. So when you're keeping your local market demand, when you're keeping that in mind, if you find that you can't sell all of your worms, consider selling other products like worm tea or compost, or diversify your offerings, so that that can help balance out your income. So you may want to start selling some worm bins ready made for people to just grab and go, or worm tea, or I've had people do what they call worm tea bombs, where they make up these little tea sacks for people to make tea with, rather than selling them a whole bag of castings. So there's all kinds of different things that you can do to help offset your income. So before I go into the spreadsheet that I want to show you, I want you to think about a few things on avoiding some common pitfalls. So let's discuss some common mistakes to avoid when expanding your worm bin systems. Overproduction. Don't start with too many bins if you're unsure about demand. So make sure you know what your demand is out there before you start just piling on more and more bins, because you don't want to be stuck with a lot of worms and no buyers, and you're having to take care of that, because it is a lot of work. When you get beyond 3 or 4 worm bins, you start really feeling the work. And especially when you're having to count cocoons, count wisp, trying to get your production rates down and that kind of stuff. If you got 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 bins going, you're just going and you don't really have any idea what you're doing, other than you're just producing worms, and you're not getting some processes down in the beginning, then you're going to find yourself working a lot. And then you're going to get discouraged because you're not selling the worms. So that goes back again to last week's call, where, marketing is very important from the beginning. Underestimating timing is another pitfall. Remember that caring for more bins means more time spent on maintenance. So make sure you're ready to scale your operations responsibly. In other words, if you're still working another job and you're having to take care of 100 bins opposed to 10 bins, it's a big difference. And you start, kind of moving into your sleep time or your personal time. Maybe you're used to sitting down and watching a sitcom, in the evenings, and now you can't because you got these worms to go take care of. So just make sure that this is really where you're wanting to go, and you're not getting overwhelmed with it. The other thing is ignoring your bin's health. You want to make sure that you ensure each bin is healthy and producing at optimal levels before adding any more. Because the last thing you want to do is have 100 bins and you're not seeing any cocoons. You're not, they're not proper moisture. They're not proper food. Maybe, you got some problems going on. You need to correct those problems and know what they are before you start adding more, because it's better to have fewer and have productive bins than to have too many of them unperforming. So now I want to go to my spreadsheet and show you some really eye openers that's probably going to blow your mind. Let's see. Let me see how I can share that. There we go. All right. I'm going to go to where I can change numbers. But let's just say that you want to be able to sell 10 pounds of worms per week. Now, one thing, if you look at this sheet, it's going to tell you over here that 3.5 months is what your doubling time estimated, which is 14 weeks. So if you want to produce 10 pounds of worms every single week to sell, you're going to be on a 14-week rotation. That means every 14 weeks, that bin that you took out of today 14 weeks from now, you can pull out of that bin again, but you can't pull out before then. So your total harvest over 14 weeks. Now my goal was, that's what this is set up on, was 100 pounds a week, to double in this period to sustain what I needed to be making each week to pay for my overhead and stuff. So if you look at 100 pounds a week, first thing you're going to want to look at is this equals in pounds to 1,400 pounds I need in that 14-week ratio. So I need every week to be able to pull 100 pounds of worms out of my bins. That means that I need to start with 2,800 pounds of worms so that I can go ahead and start pulling my 100 pounds out and letting those reproduce, so that in 14 weeks I can come back around and pull another 100 pounds out of that section. So my bins are 32 square feet. They're 4 by 8 feet. So I need 87, you might as well say 88 bins or 88 beds, to be able to produce 100 pounds of worms every single week. That means each bin I can pull 16 pounds out of. So 16 pounds to get me 100 pounds is 100 divided by 16. I need to pull worms out of 6.25 of my beds, and that's taking up half of the bed to equal my 100 pounds. And then those beds will sit for 14 more weeks, and I should have doubled what was left, which would have been 50 pounds or all total, and those would reproduce. So 16 pounds in the bin should reproduce back to 32 pounds in that 14-week period. So then I can start pulling again. But let's start with some small numbers. So if you want to sell 10 pounds of worms per week consistently, you're going to need, and let's say that your bins are like mortar trays or bus pans. Those run about 2 square feet. You're going to need to start with 140 bins to produce you 10 pounds of worms consistently each week, because you're only going to be able to take 1 pound of worms per week out of each bin, which would be 10 bins that you would be pulling out of. So in order to do that, if you wanted to start selling this week, you're going to need to start with 280 pounds of worms to produce your 140 pounds of worms in that 14-week period. So that's probably a big eye opener for you guys, because most people think you only need 4 or 5 bins to start selling worms. You can do that, but you're going to deplete that bin to the point you're not going to have worms to sell. You're going to run out real quick. So, you know, if you wanted to sell 2 pounds of worms per week, then you're going to need 28 bins. That's selling the consistent 2 pounds of worms a week. If it's red wigglers, that's about $80 a week that your revenue would bring in. I'm sorry, about $160 a week that your revenue would bring in. 160, roughly $160 a week for your revenue. And then you have to take out your expenses. So if you're buying worm chow, or you're buying bins or tape or boxes or anything, electricity, whatever it costs you to run your business, you're going to need to take that out of your sales revenue to get your net profit. And this chart just goes down if you had 32 square feet, which is a 4x8 bin, and you wanted to sell 20 pounds of worms a week, you would need to be able to produce 280 pounds of worms every 14 weeks. You would need 560 pounds of worms, and you would need 18 bins, so forth and so on. And I hope you guys can see these numbers here. But I'm going to go back, and if you have any questions, we can wrap this up. If you've got a sales figure in mind and you want to know, if you want to know how many bins you need, if you could tell me how many pounds of worms you want to sell a week and what size your bin is, I can give you a few examples on here while we're on the call before we wrap up and go to any other questions that you guys have. And I do not see anything in the chat. Cassie, are you seeing anything in the chat? What would be the minimum number of bins you'd recommend starting with? Again, that really, one, you only need one to get started. So for me to really answer that question, Camry, I really need to know, what is your sales goal? Because that's going to, and then what time frame are you wanting to be able to sell? Are you wanting to sell immediately? Are you wanting to, start now and grow it out for a year? What is your, you give me a little bit more information, because you can start out with one bin as a minimum. It's going to depend on your space. My spreadsheet is not on my website. We do plan to include this in our worm farming conference course that we're going to be offering here real soon. And you could play with these numbers in that. I think we do offer it if you buy worms in bulk. I know we used to. I haven't looked at my own website in a while, so I don't even know if we still offer that. But I do know that it will be in the worm course, along with some of the other sheets that we've shown in the last couple of calls. I think we're going to do, someone was wanting a chart of accounts that I have. I plan on having that available. And then the profit calculator that I had, I plan on having that available. So the worm farming course is going to be very detailed. You're going to have access to a lot of tools to use. So yeah, it's going to be really, really good. Tell us how many pounds you want to sell per week and the size of your bin, and we'll do the calculation for you. Yep. So what is your sales goal and time frame? Anybody want to give me a formula to work up for you? It can be fictitious. It can be a mock-up. It could be a dream. It could be practical. It could be what your actual, goal is. I know for a fact there are y'all out there that want to replace your income. So this is a good time to ask so that you will be able to plan. Because if you don't have a plan, you're fooling yourself, because you're going to overwork yourself, or either you're going to underwork yourself. Because in the worm business, there's a lot of speculation out there on the web. There's a lot of things that are just really not accurate. And, a lot of it's just people reading stuff and then rewriting it. They haven't ever actually even ran a worm bin or a worm farm. And I know there's very few out there that has ran one on the scale that I'm running mine on. So, there's just a lot of rhetoric out there. So, I'll be glad to answer any questions. I'll give it a couple more seconds here before we wrap up our call, because I mean, this is just really simple math. And again, I don't mind answering anything. Cassie, I guess there's no more questions. How much bedding do we need over the course of a year for one bin? That's going to depend on what type of bedding you're using, how much bedding you want to put in your worm bin. I use on a bus pan, I use 1 gallon. So that's going to determine how many bins you have, what your inputs are, because bedding is, everybody uses different stuff. Some people use peat moss, some people use manures, some people use paper, shredded paper. But what I can tell you is it's a lot. If let's say you're doing one bin and it's 1 gallon, you would be changing that out every 21 days. So you would have to do the math from that. So let's see. If I have 52 weeks divided by 3, because that's 20, that'd be 17. So about 17 gallons of bedding is what you would need for one bin if you set it up the same way that I do. Okay, so if you want to make $375 a week divided by 45, that means you want to sell 8.33. So we'll say 9 pounds. We go to our calculator and we punch in, we want to sell 9 pounds a week. And I need to know what your bin size is. Kamari, could you tell me what your bin size is? How many square feet? Okay, do you know what the length times the width is? Does anybody know what I haven't used mortar trays in quite some time. I want to say those are 2. Yep, you're right. I wanted to say those were 2 square feet. Okay, so Kamari, you're going to need a total of 126 mortar trays. You're going to need to start with 252 pounds of worms, and you would be able to start selling that this week. There you go. So, okay, Mark, you want to do 1,000, and how much do you want to sell your worms for? Mark, I need to know how much you want to sell your worms for and what square foot your bins are. Okay, I'm 50. Okay, so, and what size are your bins? Bus pan. So those are also right about 2 square feet. So you're going to need to do 20 pounds per week. So you're going to need to do 280 bins. You'll need to start with 560 pounds of worms, and you would be able to start selling 20 pounds of worms this week, starting this week, and rotating that out each week, each on a 14-week rotation. But you're going to need 280 of those bins to be able to sell 20 pounds of worms per week without having to buy more worms. And again, that is revenue, that is not net profit. So you're going to need to figure out what your cost of doing business is and add that into your $1,000 so that you know exactly how much you need to be bringing in each week. So you would like to supplement your income by $200 a week. We'll use the $50 a pound again, and we'll use the 2 square feet. So you're going to need to be able to sell 4 pounds a week. So you're going to need 56 bins is what you're going to need to do your $200 a week consistently without having to repurchase worms. That was for Happy Dirt Dude. Anyone else? Bus bins, racks hold 20 bins each, 5 racks total, 100 pounds of worms capacity total just in those. I will give you how many bins you need, and then you can figure how many bins you have and your racks and all that, but I'll give you the total for the 100 pounds. So if you're doing 100 pounds and they're bins and not beds, that would be 2 square feet each to sell 100 pounds of worms a week. You're going to need 1,400 bins. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, okay, it's 4 square feet. So 4 square feet, you would need 700 of those bins. But bus pans are about 2. So the person before that mentioned bus bins. So you would need 1,400. I'm going to tell y'all I did 3,500 bins, bus pans, and I did it one time. I did the harvesting one time, and I was done. So if you're going to want to do hundreds of pounds of worms, you know, or even 50 pounds or more, I would say go to a 4x8 bed instead of bus pans. So how many pounds would we divide up into each of those trays? So you would need 2 pounds in each one of those trays to equal your 100 pounds. I think yours was 100 pounds. That's figuring it on 2 pounds of worms. But you also have to remember when you get into bus pans, you really only want for production 500 worms. So really you're going to need even more bins than that. You know, this calculator was really done more for beds than bins, but you know, it'll still equal out pretty good, but you're going to really need more bins, probably than what I'm actually telling you. Because you 2 pounds of worms in a bus pan, your worms aren't going to want to reproduce because they're going to be kind of overcrowded. So you probably just about need to double that. Is there an estimated percent for cost of goods sold? Peter, that is such a big variable for everyone, because I have no idea what your electric bill is. I have no idea what your rent or your overhead would be if you have any of that. You know, your gas going back to the postal service, your postage. You know, there's so many variables. I can tell you on my level at selling worms at $79, I make about $1.78 a pound that I get to take home out and put in my pocket. But I have a lot of overhead due to the size building I have, due to the equipment that I've purchased, you know, due to the amount of tape, gas, lights, trash pickup, phone service, internet service, you know, peat moss, you know, your initial startup, you guys. I don't know if y'all thought about that too, but you know, your initial startup, really and truly, if you're really going into this for a business, you have to understand most businesses don't really start putting money in their pocket until about the fifth or sixth, at least no sooner than the fifth year, but it's usually closer to the 10th year. If you're really going into it as a business, you know, you can make a little bit of money. And I say that not knowing what everybody's situation is. I'm talking about somebody like myself who had no money to just jump out there and buy 2,800 pounds of worms. So I had to work up to that. And, you know, I had to buy bins and stuff along the way. So all my money has been reinvested. Last week, we showed y'all out of nearly $500,000, we actually profited $30,000. So that money we take and put right back into the business to grow the business. So it's very variable. Yeah, those numbers that I gave you was after shipping, because most of my business is shipped. I don't have a whole lot of local business. You know, that's one of the reasons why, you know, our prices are at $79 for a pound of red wigglers. You know, shipping cost is roughly around $16 to ship a pound of worms. So that in itself takes a big chunk out of the equation. So and we sell our worms other than bulk for the same price, whether you pick up or whether we ship them. And the reason we do that is because if we ship worms, we know how much that shipping's going to be, but we can get them done and then we can go on about our business. If somebody comes and picks up their worms, I usually wind up having to spend an hour or so or more with them, because they're sitting there asking me all these questions, you know, on how to take care of them, how to raise them. So you have a lot of education that you have to talk to people about. So they take up a lot of my time. Therefore, you know, have to get paid for my time. So and our shipping is free to the customer. So, you know, there's no savings, so to speak, if they pick up their worms or whether we ship their worms, because either way, we either pay it out in shipping or we pay it with our time. Okay. So you're using 100 bus bins. Okay, you're doing it backwards from the way. Let's see. Let me see if I can figure that out, because I think the way that I have this set up is you need to know what your sales goal is to know how many bins you need. I understand that you already have these bins, but this is kind of going backwards from the way you need to do it, but I'll see what I can figure out. I can't do the half barrels because I'm not sure what size they are unless you know that. Bus bins, if you had 100 of them, let's see, probably. Chris, can you give me your total square foot? That'll help me out better. Where do we get 4x8 beds? You build them. Most people build them out of wood. I built mine out of 1x6s and 2x4s. Let me see if I can get Chris an answer on. So Chris, on your 100 bus pans, you would be able to produce about 7 pounds a week with 100 bus pans, roughly. It's not exact. And then 48 square feet in the barrels total. And out of your barrels, you're probably going to be able to sell about 2 pounds a week out of those. I think, if I figured that right. It's going backwards, Chris, from what I have this set up to do. So I'm just kind of guesstimating. But what you really need to do, Chris, is you need to know what your sales goals are. Before you guys ever start growing your worms, you need to have a plan. You need to know what your goals are. Like for me, I knew I needed to make $200 a week to be able to quit my job. That was after, getting my bonuses from my old job and paying off all my bills. And then I needed $200 a week to fill the gap between my husband's income and what I needed to make to be able to quit my job and still be able to maintain our household. So, that's the first thing you need to do is, you need to know what your sales goals are so that you can determine then where you need to be on the amount of bins and stuff like that. How would I figure or translate with euros? Again, Rick, euros are still 1 pound of worms per square foot of surface area. So it's translated all the same. But again, just remember, if your reproduction is, included in that, you may have to spread out those bins. I would need to know what the square footage of the surface area of the urban worm bag is to give you that number, Renee. I want to say those might be 6 square feet, but I'm not absolutely sure. And what would you be selling your worms for? I can do it on $50 like we've done for everyone else if you would like for me to. And I'm going to say that it's probably around somewhere between 4 to 6. I want to say It's somewhere between 4 to 6 square feet on those, but I'm not 100% sure. So again, unless you know what that square foot of surface area, because it doesn't matter how deep it is, we need to know what your surface area is. So if you would need to produce, if you're selling them at $50 and you want to make $400, you need to be able to sell 8 pounds of worms. So for 8 pounds of worms, and we'll say they're probably 4 square feet. I'm just going to say that's probably what they are. I'm not 100% sure. You're going to need 56 of those to produce 8 pounds of worms consistently every week for the year. 56. You're going to need 224 pounds of worms to start with. All right, so at $45, then you're going to need probably 400 divided by 45 is 9, right at 9. So 9 pounds, you're going to need 63 urban worm bags. Now, honestly, guys, if y'all are wanting to sell worms, the worm bags, the stackable trays, those are not really good choices, in my opinion, for worm production. Those are more for castings production. They work great for castings production, and they work great for home gardeners, but not really for production. So my best one has been the ones that I have now, which are the wooden bins. They're hip high, and we just transitioned into this right after spring this year. And those are 4 by 8, so they're 32 square feet. And I need at minimum 100 pounds of worms per week. And those bins are 32 square feet. So I need a minimum of 88 of those bins to produce me 100 pounds of worms consistently every week without depleting my worms and having to buy more in. Now, I can tell you, I only have 68 bins running right now. We've got to finish building, so I am having to buy in worms, some, and I generally buy in throughout the winter anyway, because come spring, I really need about 300 to 400 pounds of worms a week. That 100 pounds a week, somebody's buying some already. That 100 pounds a week is my minimum number. I would only have continuous flow through if I was producing castings. If I was in the worm production like I am, you need a bottom in that bin because you need that moisture. Because what you read online about the wrung out sponge, that's for worm castings production. If you are in the worm growing production, what we call vermiculture, your bins need to be like a wet sponge that has took up as much water as it can possibly take up without dripping out. So that's about 85 to 90%, opposed to the 40 to 50% for castings. So make sure these bins have bottoms in them. I start all of my worm bins in about 2 inches of material, and then you just build from that. You don't, especially if you're using red wigglers, because they're going to stay in the top 1 to 2 inches of the material. So you want all that's on the bottom to be processed before you add more material. So if you start out with, 5 or 6 inches of material, then that's under 2 inches is just going to be unprocessed. So it's not going to really be castings. Now, I will tell you, in the summer and the winter, if I change my bed out completely, like if I deplete that bed for whatever reason, I do start it deeper, because when it's really hot, they need extra insulation for the heat, or if it's really cold, they need extra insulation because of the cold. So that's the only time that and I generally don't change it or take up the whole bed during that time. So it's usually maybe, somebody needed some castings, and that was the only way that I could do it. So, all right, we got time for 1 or 2 more questions, and then we're going to wrap it up for the night. For a 4x8 bin, you're going to need 32 pounds to start that bin. 1 pound of worms per square foot of surface area. 4 times 8 is 32. That gives you your square foot of surface area. So you need 32 pounds of worms. Do I have a picture of my bins? I do have a picture of my bins. Unfortunately, I can't show it on here, but I have lots of videos out on YouTube at Mimi's Worms, and it even shows you, of us building them. So good. I mean, if you really want some really good insight to our worm farm, that's probably the best place to see that. You'll see, I think it's under something like Mimi's Evolving Again. This is the 3rd time that we have transitioned, because again, we didn't have a lot of money to just set it up the way I wanted to in the beginning. So we had to take baby steps. And now that we've found where we really want to keep it at, we will be building this out to 178 bins when we're finished. But right now we have 68. So it is a lot of work using the mortar trays. How many credit wiggler? I will say, on the large mortar trays, unless you can really lift 100 pounds effortlessly, consistently, I would not use the large mortar trays. Unless you really have somebody to help you with them, because they get very, very heavy with water. And we all know that water weighs 8 pounds. Y'all got to let my dog out this room. He's having a fit. Sorry about that. But if I'm not sure what a credit wiggler is. I'm trying to. Okay, red wiggler. Okay. Cassie, can you go back to that question? I thought that's what you meant, but I just wasn't sure. How many red wigglers is best for each large mortar tray? Okay. So what I will tell you is you need to do some tests. because your setup is going to be different from mine, I'm sure, depending on what inputs you have, depending on how much, whether you're using, like we use pre-compost for our breeder bins, which is the only thing that I use mortar trays for anymore. And I don't even do that a whole lot. I just do that to do videos and teach people. I can tell you, in a bus bin or bus pan, our sweet spot was 500 red wigglers per bin. Those mortar trays are bigger, so you would really need to do some tests with, I'd probably start those at around 500 in my first bin, and then just keep moving up 100 worms until you see which one produces the most cocoons per worm. It is tedious, but again, you guys are going to have to go through this to know what works best for you, because every climate is different, every region is different, your setup's different, your inputs are different. There is too many variables to have a cut and dried formula for anyone. And anybody out there saying that, you can, you really, I'm telling you, the way you set up or the way you do things are going to be different from the way someone else does them. You may have some things alike, but I guarantee you your environment's going to be different. Your humidity is going to be different. Your temperatures are going to be different. Your seasons are going to be different. So it's just a lot of variables. So I would start at 500 and then move up 100 count each time. And then when you run your 21 days, you'll take your worms out of there and you'd count all your cocoons. I have a video out there on counting cocoons, and it's very tedious, but it's just part of the job when you're learning to know what you have that's going to work best for you. Any idea when our course is going to be ready? So, I can tell you we are working diligently on it. We probably in a few weeks will start pre-sale on it. And we probably will start selling it before it's completely finished. But we'll be adding to it, either weekly or daily. So, and the thing about our course, you guys, once you purchase the course, anytime we add to that course, that's going to be included in that course. Now, we are also going to also offer a marketing course. So you'll be able to purchase the worm farming course, and then we'll have the advanced with the marketing added to that. Not everybody wants that, but you will, in order to get the marketing, you will have to purchase the worm farming course. So I'm hoping within the next 2 to 3 weeks that we'll be able to start taking pre-orders on those. And again, like I said, we're going to have a lot of things like this that you'll have access to, how many bins you're going to need, your profit and loss, so that you can figure that. That really, really helps you be able to see what you need to sell your worms for. And I'm going to work on having a chart of accounts because someone was asking about that. So anyone else? No, Jen, I'm not in the castings production. I have no idea on castings. I'm in the worm production. So I'm an expert in growing and producing worms, but although castings are a byproduct for us, I could not tell you a whole lot other than, 2,000 pounds equals a ton of castings. I know that sounds terrible, y'all, but I'm just not into producing castings. And, my whole uh, business has been built on worm production. And I mean, I know castings are a wonderful commodity, and we sell a bunch of them. We've sold about 50 tons this year, but it is not something that I spend a lot of time on. It is a byproduct for me. Larry, we get down here in Georgia, we get down into the teens at night, but then it moves back up, usually above freezing. Um, we have very mild winters, so I've never had my worms dying off due to cold ever. Um, Someone in the worm, if you are a member of the worm squad, that would be a good question to put in there, because we have a lot of people from a lot colder states that could probably answer that a little bit better than I could, because my temperatures here are very mild in the winter. We have to really watch ours in the summer. Although we went all summer long, our beds never got over 85, even though some of our days were well over 100. So, and that was really and truly only due to having airflow. We kept the air moving in the building. We don't have air conditioning, but we did have big fans that just kept the air moving. So that was the biggest thing, is in the summertime, is keeping that air flowing. We do not have the cost of the course figured out, that or the marketing, simply because we're trying to figure out how much time we're having to put into it. So I do know that I want this to be the best course. We're trying to determine, what all is going to be involved, and how we factor that. And maybe you guys can put in the comments. We've thought about, like, after we, selling the course, if you guys would like for us to do like a weekly call and do it as a subscription, where, we do it as a group, and you can really horn in, so to speak, and we can dig in deeper into things. We've thought about that. We've got a lot of things that are running through our minds on what we would like to do. But I think our first and main focus right now is just getting the course done. And, and then worry about some of the other stuff later. I really, really enjoy educating and, deep diving. A lot of the course, especially if we do a weekly call, is a lot of that would be around business. I feel like there's a lot out there on the internet if somebody's just wanting to, make a worm bin for their own garden, but really when you get into the hobby or business side of it, there's a lot of things that can cost you a lot of money, if you're not aware of what to look for. And hopefully, I will be able to save you guys from going down some of these rabbit holes, some of these pitfalls, and save you a lot more money, because like I said, I've had my share of dead worms. I've killed probably more than all of y'all put together. Um, you know, most of the time it was just really mistakes that could have been prevented. Um, Maybe I wasn't paying attention, or, or just never crossed my mind. For instance, um, one of the things that I do is anytime I get in a new load of manure or anything, I test a few worms in that material before I give it to all of my worms, because I did that one time and I killed all my worms. And from there on out, it doesn't matter if I buy it from the same vendor every single time. I still test a few worms before I feed it to my whole herd. So things like that, it's just little tidbits of things that can really save you a lot of money and a lot of heartache down the road. Anyone else? We're about to wrap this up. Yes, we have sold about 50 tons of castings this year. And I will tell you, I have not, the only thing I have is a ad on Facebook Marketplace. It's been up for several years. But the majority of what I sold this year was to local people. And on Facebook Marketplace, it doesn't cost you anything. This is the first year that castings has really picked up and sold. I just sold a truckload last week and it cleaned me out for this year. So we have them advertised on our website for, I think it's 500, but we really sell them for 400. But the reason we put them out there online at 500 is because I don't want to undercut the people who are selling castings, because I'm not trying to bring the market down. It's just they're a byproduct for me and I need them out of my way. And, but, they're out there at 500 so that we don't bring that price down. And guys, I know a lot of you said you wanted to sell worms at 45 and 50, yada, yada. Being new, I really want you to think about a couple of things when it comes to pricing your worms. And that is, you should not try to build your business on the cheapest price, because you're going to work yourself to death for very little money. And it is, if you only have a few worm bins, it doesn't really seem like that much work. But as you grow, it's going to become a lot of work. The best thing to do is to price them higher. Look at the market, see what, and I can tell you, pure red wigglers, $79, I sell them all day long. So why anybody would want to go sell them, for half of that price is, in my opinion, is ludicrous, because you're driving the price down, and we don't need to, because the demand is there. You can always have a sale. I have sales all the time. But when you realize how much work's really involved, it's hard to go up on a price as it is to just put that product on sale. Secondly, you want to make money. And if somebody's selling worms at $45 a pound, you have not figured in your time. Now, if you only want to make $2 or $3 an hour for your time, then by all means, sell them at $45. But your time is valuable and you need to be paid. You wouldn't go to work for someone else for $2 or $3 an hour. So why would you work for yourself for $2 or $3 an hour? And the $500 is for a ton of castings. Chris, we sell our euros for $59 a pound. We have a sale right now on 2-pounders for $79, and then it just goes up from there. What percentage of my revenues goes to shipping? We'd have to look back at I'd have to go look at that. I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm sorry. All righty, I guess that's all the questions for tonight. Y'all, we really appreciate you guys joining our call. I'm not quite sure what next week's call is going to be about, but I can assure you it'll be good. It'll be informative. If there's something that you would love for us to talk about, drop it down in the comments, because it really helps us if we know what you're really wanting to know and to find out about. I know most of the video so far has been on the business end of things, because you can find a lot of the other stuff out on the internet, but you don't really have anybody talking about the business side. So that's one reason I kind of started there, because I get a lot of calls from people, wanting to ramp up and not just have, 1 or 2 bins at home. They really want to, be either on a hobbyist level or a commercial level. If you're new to this call, if you're joining in for the first time and you missed the last 2 calls that we did, which were super fantastic, if you guys were on the call on those, if you could put in the comment, great if you liked it, or whatever you want to comment, so that anyone new in the group would know whether or not it would be worth them going and joining the squad, which is free by, we don't charge anything to join the squad, but by being a member of the squad, you will get to be able to see these replays at any time. So you can go back and reference and look back. I think if you look back at last week's, you may get that answer on the shipping percentage. If not, if you'll ask that question in the squad, I'll try to look it up and let you know. I know our cost of shipping runs somewhere between, depending on the years, between 50 to 75,000 a year is what we spend on shipping. And that's just on worms. That's not counting trommels and castings and those things, but that's just on worms. That's going through the Postal Service. Anyway, back to the squad. So if you haven't joined our squad, please go and check that out. If you got any questions you didn't get answered here today, if you'll ask them again in the squad, I'll try to get those answered. I know Damien has been doing a wonderful job moderating that for us, while Casty and I has been spending our time building the course, and then we have to still work for getting the call ready for the week and those kind of things. So just bear with us. One thing I would like for you to do in the comments, if you would like to, and I know we don't have a price out there yet, and that's fine, you don't have to commit, I just really would like to know who really has an interest in us putting together a course, just so that we can see if there's really a need for it, because maybe, we're wasting our time, but if there's, really some interest there, that's really what we would really like to be able to do. I know we want to keep it affordable, so um, that's why we were thinking maybe uh, doing the weekly call and as a subscription for that part, just so that we can really dive deeper, rather than trying to just put everything in print. So um, I think that might be something we may look at, but let me know if you would be interested in that as well. And you can just type in call if you think that would, or subscription. Type in subscription if you think that would be a valuable uh, thing for us to do. So we're really just trying to figure out what you guys are wanting from us so that we can produce that for you, because I really want our channel and our group to be 100% the best that it can be. And I want it to be so different from what you have experienced anywhere else. Awesome, Miss King. We will definitely keep you in mind. And Peter, awesome. Wow. My goodness. Okay, good deal. Well, wonderful. Well, we will keep working our behinds off. And I know we're going to do it in segments and modules. So probably once we get about 3 of those modules done, we'll start, uh, offering the course. And, that way you can, yes, you can find those past 2 calls in the Worm Squad. You have to be a member of the Worm Squad. And you can, Cassie, can you put on there where to find that at, on what sidebar? Because I cannot remember. I think it's under events. Yeah. Yep. So once you become a member, Miss Carolyn, if you look to the left side under the events, you click on that, and then you should see the other calls in there. And again, it's free to sign up and join. It's a wonderful group. I mean, we have been praised over and over and over about setting this up. You can watch everything from the past events. You can ask questions. You can post your YouTube videos. There's live chat. My goodness, there's so much in that squad, and wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people in it. I mean, it is definitely, if you've ever been on Facebook and asked a question and just got made to feel like you were the dumbest person for asking a question, especially new people, because we ask a lot of the questions that, yes, somebody answered 15 years ago. I'm not going to look back at all that. I want to, ask my question now. And, so you get you rub people wrong. You won't have that in the group. And if there's ever anybody that is disrespectful to another person, we will get rid of you in our squad, because that's not the kind of people we want in our group of people. We want people that are respectful of each other, who are helpful, who share ideas, who help one another. We're all in this together. And there is a huge, huge, huge market out there that has not been touched. I cannot produce enough. That's why I'm teaching you guys. The other thing is, one thing I have not mentioned in our calls, I don't think, but I am looking for anyone who may want to be a wholesaler to Mimi's. If so, if you would just shoot me an email at mimisworms.com. But I will tell you, you need to be able to produce more than 5 or 10 pounds of worms a week. But we we won't talk numbers until, for one, we have to vet you. We have to know how you ship. We have to know what type of worm you have. So, but there is a big opportunity out there for someone that wants to grow worms, that doesn't, you won't need any marketing skills, but you will need pure red wigglers. And I do mean pure 100%, preferably you've bought them from us so that we know that they are 100% pure, but we will vet you. Um, but, do not email me and just want to talk about how much I can pay you, because I get a lot of those calls, and um, you got to be really in this thing and really motivated uh, before we talk numbers. Anybody else? Okay, well, I think that wraps up this week's call. I enjoyed this. I love teaching you guys. I love really surprising you guys, because I'm sure this was a big eye opener as well. So I hope that you guys will join us next week. And to tell you the truth, I'm trying to figure out what to talk about next week. So if you have any ideas, please put them down in the comments and help me out so I don't have to rack this old brain of mine. So until next time, you guys, y'all have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you over in the squad.